Welcome. We're very happy to be talking about cybersecurity and steps you can take, patterns we're seeing out there. It's a very important topic and one that's becoming even more important over the last short period of time. I'm delighted. I'm Nigel Smith, CEO of VirtaMove. VirtaMove helps customers move their workloads to secure, modern, scalable servers, and they can move those legacy workloads easily to those new platforms. But I'm really delighted today to be joined by Paul Summit. Paul is the cybersecurity partner with KPMG. He's an expert in this area, has worked widely in the field. And Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Nigel. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so, we thought we'd start, the podcast webinar today by just getting some advice from you, Paul. If you can give us an idea of the trends that KPMG is seeing in the cybersecurity area. I mean, it's been a very special type of year in this area, but why don't you give us some insights in the patterns that are going on, please?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Nigel. Yeah. So this slide we're seeing, it's one slide, but it's got a lot of the key thought leadership that KPMG's produced over the last year in 2023. So there's some real interesting statistics to look at. We'll pick out a few of them for discussion here. So I think if you see kind of bottom center, 60% of small to medium-sized enterprises say their company has paid out a ransom in the last 3 years. So that's actually,
that's
companies
staggering,
being hit
right,
on paying
Paul?
out. Yeah, exactly.
That's a huge number to think of that. That's a
Yeah.
huge, I mean, and those ransoms can be quite substantial.
Yeah, well, we've seen them, I think the University of Calgary was a famous case where they paid out a ransom, and I think it was $50,000, and that was maybe 4 years ago. But we've seen, like, now some of the amounts we're seeing is kind of 7-figure, even 8-figure ransom demands. So
Wow,
it's definitely increasing.
that's amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's hard if you don't pay the ransom. I mean, there's this timely story about the hospitals network who didn't pay the ransom, and then all the patient data showed up in the dark web, right?
Yeah, so we're increasingly seeing extortion attempts. So whether either the organization gets hit by ransom and then they threaten to release it on the dark web, or even they don't even use ransom. They just ransomware. They actually exfiltrate sensitive data, especially if it's medical healthcare data, and then try and extort money from the organization to prevent that being released into the wild, so into the public domain. So which can obviously be potentially embarrassing and lead to class action lawsuits, as we're seeing in that case.
And those are, I mean, it's public knowledge, but those are pretty substantial lawsuits, aren't they, Paul? I mean, what are we talking?
Yeah, I think the media are reporting around $480 million or $450 million. So obviously these always have kind of high figures, but it's just you've got to feel for the people involved in the organization, because they've been impacted by this ransomware, and then they're trying to rebuild systems, get things online, and then these other things are going on as well, with it all playing out in the media. So it's not a great scenario.
Yeah, I mean, and even if if they're impacted, I mean, again, public knowledge, but Clorox, for example, they were talking about a operational impact of $500 million that they couldn't make product for a period of time. And the recent one as well in the Toronto library system, it knocked them out and they're still not up, but it's 4 more months of not being able to operate
Yeah,
because of the
we've seen cases with organizations where they're hit by ransomware and they're trying to rebuild their systems. Maybe backups aren't as good as they could have been, and having to rebuild effectively their whole environment. So if you think of the kind of time, typically it's an organization with a small IT team. They just don't have the resources to kind of do that kind of full rebuild. So it can be, they need to bring it in external parties, and then it ends up really quite expensive, not
So
just in
it's not
terms of
just
the
big
rebuild.
companies, right? It's not just big companies. In fact, you were saying something about smaller ones even being more vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you think of a bank or, a typically mature organization, they'll have a security team of maybe 100, 200 people. They've got a lot of tooling. It's a very mature organization. Whereas what we're seeing, especially in Ontario, is manufacturing organizations who typically have a smaller team. Maybe there's not even anyone who's responsible for security. It kind of falls on the head of the IT person, that they're being targeted either with ransomware or kind of CEO fraud type attacks. And because it's for the attacker, it's the low hanging fruit. So it's if you can reach out to kind of 20 organizations, manufacturing organizations that are kind of low maturity in terms of their cyber investment, who may have some legacy systems, of course, as well. It's a lot easier to get through and have a successful attempt by the attacker compared to trying to go after a bank or something with a lot better defenses.
And I guess they're using AI now to even target even narrower those who are most exposed. Would you say that's a bit of a trend that's developing?
I think, yeah. I mean, it's Gen AI. It's been the kind of the thing of 2023, and yeah, we're definitely seeing we're going to see that more being used more in terms of the attack approaches. Certainly, and being able to, we've definitely seen it being used to produce those kind of phishing emails. Typically you'd get the phishing emails with some obvious spelling errors, grammatical errors, that kind of thing, and it would be a bit of a giveaway. But they're actually using chat GPT or whatever tool to AI tool to create very tailored crafted emails, which is using inputs from kind of a lot of social media, LinkedIn posts, company websites. That's all feeding in to produce these really targeted phishing emails using AI to produce those.
So what do you think's holding companies back with respect to securing these legacy systems that are so exposed, that are, you know, generating so much of the breach profile that they're
Yeah.
doing?
So I guess typically with legacy systems, maybe it's an inertia thing. Often it's kind of a system that's not used as much, but it's still maybe critical to the organization. Often it's out of support, and hence it's a legacy system, so it's potentially vulnerable. We've seen attacks where it's one legacy system that's an IP address on the internet. It's still being used, and that's the back door into an organization to then laterally move across the organization and across the network. But and quite often as well, the skills and expertise that built and then fed and watered these legacy systems may have left the organization. So the existing team that are kind of working with it don't have that kind of expertise, which leaves the legacy system potentially vulnerable.
Hmm. Yeah, and our view is that amnesia is so widespread, especially with turnover, the pandemic, people left, they moved on. But you need some form of automated tool that can discover and relearn that application in an automated way so that you can move it to a more secure platform. That's so critical, being able to get those workloads onto a server and an operating system that can run the modern security tools, and you can improve the security dramatically because those tools can be used on a
Yeah.
modern platform.
What do you think of those so for an organization that's kind of got a legacy system, what do you think of those kind of initial first steps that they could do to try and secure it?
Well, I think it's the best first move is to take the older workloads and put it on to a supported operating system where you can have a standard version, patch properly, and run the most modern security tools. Harden it with the best of breed security and AI monitoring tools. you can't do that on those older unsupported operating systems. And quite frankly, they're not in compliance in any
Mm,
regulated industry. And Paul, my own view is most of those companies that are continuing to run important operational systems on an unsupported OS, soon they're not going to be able to get any cybersecurity insurance
mm. Yeah,
because
that's a good point.
they're not in compliance. And if you look at the cost of these breaches, the numbers are getting quite large, and no one's going to insure against that anymore.
Yeah, we
So
yeah, I
is
was
that
going
a
to say
fact?
we've definitely seen so cyber insurers are being a lot more choosy and a lot more particular in terms of companies they will insure. We've seen organizations have kind of cyber insurance refused because it's just not worth the risk. And a lot of organizations now have to demonstrate a minimum level of kind of cyber hygiene and, minimum level of controls to demonstrate to the insurer that it's a worthwhile risk for them to take.
And you're going to see more class actions. I mean, if you look at patient records, and we're talking in this most recent case, 20,000 patient records being published on the dark web and available for sale. I mean, those patients are going to do something about it. And if you look at the class action, I mean, it's about $25,000 per patient that they're actually suing in that class action case. I mean, that's not going to be uncommon. And when you have large data sets with a lot of customer patient records and you're not in compliance, and there's HIPAA compliance, medical record compliance laws, and you're exposing it because you're on older unsupported environments, um, I don't think the insurance companies are going to cover it anymore because you're not compliant. And certainly we're seeing it across the board that you have a lot of due diligence on this issue by insurance companies and regulators. It's one thing to say, oh, we can't do anything, but the reality is you can. You can
Mm,
secure those systems. You can move forward and take the first best step. We're not saying redevelop everything. Once you're on a modern platform, you, of course, can do further remediation, but at least you're on a secure platform that can scale and you can use tools on it, the modern security tools. That's the best first move, in our opinion. And
yeah,
it addresses that compliance problem.
yeah, and just looking at, so if we look at the bar chart on the slide there as well, so why do Canadian CEOs feel underprepared for cyber attacks? And kind of the top one is vulnerable or legacy systems or
Yes.
infrastructure. So that's kind of 38%, which is up on the previous year. And then
Yeah.
also just increasing sophistication of and threat of cyber attacks, which is what we're seeing as well. So it's really important, and you can see in the other categories as well, those kind of the top five things. It's about investing in cyber defenses and that kind of vulnerable infrastructure.
Yeah. And we know that companies are invested in cybersecurity tools, but those tools run on modern operating systems. And the reason, our view is one of the reasons that the breaches are not reducing, even though they're investing in security tools, is over 30%, as you suggested, 35, even 40% of these breaches are associated with these old servers and old platforms that aren't secured. And you can invest all you want in cybersecurity tools, but if you're not securing old systems because those tools don't run on those old systems, the barn door is still open. And
Mm,
that's why we're seeing so much of it.
yeah.
We're seeing it, and it's this year. I don't know what your view is, but we've been warning about being under cyber attack for over 5 years at VirtaMove, but it seems to be worse this year. Do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think it definitely just increased sophistication and just much more targeted attempts. But also if you look at the geopolitical situation around the world, we've had the Russia Ukraine war going on, and then the situation with Israel and Palestine. We've seen attacks. I mean, there was quite a strange case of a brewery, a craft brewery in Pittsburgh last week, ahead of Thanksgiving weekend. Their brewery equipment was hit by ransomware, and they actually posted on their X or Twitter or whatever. The screen on the brewery system had you've been hit by ransomware, and it was a result. It posted about Israel. In terms of the motivation for the ransomware attack, so it just shows that nobody's safe. Any organization can be targeted.
Yes. And these older operating systems, the source code has been leaked. It's all over the dark web. So, if you're running 2003, 2008, uh, these hackers and ransomware teams have full access to the old operating system security and source code, and they're using it and they're reviewing it in detail to find those types of exposures that are easily penetrated. And they share that pattern across the dark web. And so these practices are developing quickly. Obviously, a fair amount of it is coming out of foreign power, whether it's Russia or North Korea or other places. And it's, we either fix the problem or we're going to have to pay ransom. And, you know, rather than doing a little bit of work, it's not better to pay ransom and take brand hits of the type that we're seeing. I mean, some of these brand hits are, in terms of the market cap of public companies, in the billions when they get these exposures. So it's a serious problem, and the investment to secure legacy is much, much lower. I mean, we're not talking, unless you've got a lot of it, they're not investing seven figures, and their exposures hundreds of millions, in some cases billions. So
Yeah, it's as an organization, your security is only as strong as your weakest link, and if it is a legacy system that's kind of vulnerable, that's going to be the way that an attacker gains access to the network. So
yeah,
that's why it's really
well, it's
key.
it's quite staggering. Is there anything else you'd like to cover on this slide? Because there's a lot of information on it, and it's clear that CEOs aren't really prepared. 6 of 10 of them.
Yeah, no, I think looking just top left, 82%. So 82% of Canadian tech execs feel they need to be more proactive in integrating trust, security, and privacy into tech rollouts. So in terms of any new projects, it's really key that security is kind of a key consideration. And also, you mentioned AI earlier. So as new projects involving AI take place, how is the AI being secured? In terms of, could the model be compromised? Those are kind of key considerations, because that could have a massive impact in the way the AI actually the results that come out of it.
And are companies that invest in proper modernization and security, are they more profitable? Do they actually do a bit better? Do you think that's a pattern we're seeing?
I think we're definitely seeing, in terms of, if you think of two organizations, two manufacturing organizations, they make the same widget effectively, they're competitive. And this could apply to any sector, financial services or whatever. But one gets hit by ransomware, their operations are out for 4 weeks, there's data loss, there's disruption, the strategic focus of the organization is now kind of looking inward. What do we do? This other organization has already invested in their security, they've secured their legacy infrastructure, their production carries on. They're seen as more reliable by other customers, and they've got that better strategic focus moving forward. So you can see that kind of disruption from a cyber attack can have a devastating impact, and you can see that on stock prices of organizations that have been hit previously. So definitely does have a major impact.
So it's not something we can keep using the ostrich approach of sticking our heads in the ground, right? I mean, it's got to be addressed. And this year, probably more than any other year, has highlighted that this has to be a top priority. Modernizing and securing systems, and especially legacy systems, has to be a priority. It's some work. I know IT's been locked down during the pandemic, work from home and all the rest, but modernizing and taking a step forward, that first best move is critical in our view.
Mm. And do you think, Nigel, that in terms of those modernization projects, does that lead to saving money? Is that more cost effective in the long run?
Well, with tools and with automation, it's much, much more cost effective. I mean, the statistics we quote is that using an AI-based modernization tool that can move those workloads to a supported OS will improve productivity by tenfold. So a single engineer can be 10 times as productive with a tool than they would be if trying to do that by hand, and they may not even be able to do it by hand because it's a complex process. It does require some work and obviously some verification and testing as you roll the new systems into production. But that's the case in every rollout and hardening of a platform. It's it saves them a lot of money
Hmm.
and it gives them a platform they can modernize and move forward and get a baseline of existing systems to compare to that are secure, the platform scalable, the operating system supported, and they're in compliance. That's the critical thing. They're not going to be exposed because they've taken that first step. Pretty hard to get a class action when you've actually done something to fix the problem and
Mm.
secure the data. So, that's what we see. It's certainly a huge increase in productivity and really gives you a base to work from as you move forward with further modification and
Mm.
modernization, which you're going to do. It's never ending because the platforms continue to progress to more modern OSs and better techniques. And you want to use and take advantage of the most modern AI tools. Well, you got to be on a modern operating system to do that. They don't run on the old platforms.
Mm.
And that's critical. So all those factors are important. So maybe we can move on to a couple of more slides and then
Sure.
open it up for questions. Susan? So is it procrastination, Paul? Do you think that's the issue or perceived complexity or they're missing the risk? What is it that's delaying all of this investment to fix the problem?
Yeah, it's I think as I touched on earlier, it's kind of often kind of inertia and kind of different focuses within the organization, kind of on newer kind of systems and that kind of thing. So it can lead to and thinking, well, it's this system's kind of served us well for 15 years or whatever, then it kind of that delays any kind of move to a newer or more secure environment.
So don't touch it. It's perceived risk that if you touch it, it'll break. Our approach is we don't touch the production system.
Mm.
We let you move the workload in a copy out process to a modern system. You can continue to run the old system until you've verified the application in the new environment. And it discovers all the complexity for you. You don't need to know everything about the old system. That's what the AI tool's for.
Yeah.
It does that application discovery and dependency mapping with the tool. You don't need perfect knowledge. If you have amnesia, that's okay. In fact, all our customers have amnesia about old systems. But that doesn't prevent them from moving forward onto a platform they can support. We
Yeah,
see a
it's got to
lot of
give.
procrastination, right? I mean, they just have other priorities.
Yeah, and it's I guess if they do move to a more secure form of the system, then it's going to give a lot of peace of mind. Then it's no longer the big concern that it was before.
Yeah, and these issues go right to the board level. I mean, many of our projects are reported to the board because
Mm.
the board sees the exposure. The companies that are addressing the problem don't consider old legacy systems low risk. They actually consider them one of the highest risk security issues that they face. And it is driven by the board, by top security people inside the business, by the CIO. they need to have it addressed. Because if they don't, I mean, it is costing people's jobs when they miss, when the breach happens. We've certainly seen that with security officers and CIOs turning over based on their procrastination or lack of willingness to address the issue.
Exactly, yeah.
So move on to the next one if we can, Susan. So the risk, is widespread. You can't get support on those old systems. Clearly, the OS vendor no longer supports the OS that's out of security support, and we're seeing that all the time. It can't even be connected properly to the network and the tools, and that's certainly the case in these older Windows systems that we're dealing with. More and more, Microsoft is dropping support and security support for the older systems. They have to move.
Have you seen an impact in terms of the cybersecurity or potential weaknesses given kind of source code leaks, especially of older source code?
Yes, I mean, that's certainly a big issue, and you cannot connect these older systems to the modern domains, the network domain support that Microsoft provides. So you're no longer able to secure them because the modern tools will not support them. And it's because all those vulnerabilities are known. And they're known not only to the ransomware teams, they're known to the operating systems teams that actually write the code. I mean, and they know what they can close and what they can't close. And they're not supporting, even with critical fixes, some of these older operating systems anymore. You've got to stay with them up on the modern versions to get the best security and the best AI tools and the best hardening. And all the vendors are going that way. They can't possibly cloud host these old systems either. I mean, you think that
Exactly.
moving to the cloud is going to solve the problem. It doesn't, because those old OSs, those old instances are no longer supported at all. So that's a real issue. And you can't get controls. You can't implement the modern security controls on these older systems. So are there any other topics or issues around legacy that we should be talking about, Paul, before we open it up for some questions?
No, I think we've done kind of good coverage of that, I think. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear if there's any questions from the audience.
Yeah, so Susan, if there are any, let us know. I'm sure if you've got some written or questions you'd like us to address, we'd be pleased to do it. Clearly, modern OSs get patches on a regular basis. They have a lot of enhanced security that you get automatically from the modern OS, and they put you in compliance. So you're not exposed from a compliance or legal perspective by running on unsupported operating systems. But Susan, let's open it up. Hi.
Okay, if anyone wants to ask any questions, you can enter them into the Q&A online.
Okay. Well, maybe everyone's shy today. Do we have any?
It usually takes a little bit. Someone needs to go first, I think.
Yeah.
I guess while we wait, Nigel, if I just like a question in terms of what's the best first move approach I see on the slide there in terms of modernization, like how would it practically take place?
So the best first move is to be able to capture the older legacy application, all of its dependencies, all of its environment, and move that into a secure, scalable, modern operating system. Most people don't believe this can be done, but this is what we've been doing thousands and thousands of these, Paul. I mean, that's your best first move. Take the workload that you have, put it from an unsupported operating system. It can continue to run there until you've verified it and cut over to the modern system. But take all those dependencies, put them on the modern OS, test it out, make sure it works properly, and then cut over onto a supported operating system. That gives you a baseline of functionality. Your existing older systems can be secured using the modern operating system and the enhanced security features that come along with that. You'll be compliant because you'll be on a supported OS with regular updates. And you can continue to harden with the best security tools available that run in that modern OS. So we consider that the lowest cost, best first move to let you modernize, because you can enhance and build new systems on a new platform faster. And you've got a base system that all your users are familiar with running in a secure environment. That's our best first move to address legacy security exposures. And it allows you to use Qualys and other tools that can assess the exposures on that legacy code, and you can address them on the modern platform quite easily. That's the best way to move forward. It doesn't require redevelopment of the whole code base. You can plan the redevelopment carefully, and if it takes a year or two to get that new system in place, you've got a secure environment to run on.
Okay, well, I think we've got a question in the chat. So I think that's one for you, Nigel, if I ask you that one. So
sure.
With the current security concerns, does VirtaMove software have to stay inside my environment after a migration? And thanks to Stephen Antoine for that question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And the answer is no. I mean, once you've done the move, it's a native install in the modern OS. There's no further dependency on our tool. And you can use every hardening tool and all the modern security tools to make sure that environment is supported. You don't have any further dependency on us. And that's important because we want standard change management once you're on that modern platform, and we're not there as a dependency.
Okay. And there's another question from Sharon Gallagher. So what experience do you have with cyber insurance firms? Could an incentive for clients be the attestations and other artifacts we can provide them to get them to move? And also, do you need strong use case to show financial benefits?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Sharon. I mean, we've had several clients go through insurance reviews, especially this year. And literally it's green light, red light. And they do their own independent verification on these applications. The insurance companies do now. And if you're red light on cross-section of these applications, they will not insure you. It's literally getting to that point. Even our own systems go through that review, Paul and Sharon. I mean, so yes, this is a strong motivation, especially when you can show, and there's so many examples of 8- and 9-figure exposures and class actions and operational exposures that are reaching that level. This is becoming a serious problem for insurance companies. It's a little bit like trying to get fire insurance in California, right? I mean,
yeah, it's like you insure your, if you have your house insurance, then
yes.
what's the risk around where your house is located, but then what security do you have locks on the windows and doors, those kind of things? Is there a fire station nearby? All those kind of questions. It's the same with when an organization is looking for cyber insurance. So if they
Yeah, and they're
have
getting a
an
lot more
attestation,
sophisticated. The insurance companies,
yeah,
they're not taking your word for it anymore, right? I
no,
mean,
exactly,
they're actually doing the due diligence themselves, and they red light, green light these applications. They're doing their due diligence because they can't afford it.
mm,
The costs, everyone, oh, well, my insurance will pay for it, or I'm not too worried about it. That's not the case anymore. And it's a
yeah,
business impact, it's a financial impact. If you look at the operational impact, public information on Clorox and companies like that, they were out of business for periods of time, and it's widespread now.
yeah. Okay, and so we've got one, I think might be the last question. This is from an anonymous attendee, and it's a question about backups. So OSs and tool sets for protection are good, and they agree with what we're saying, but the question is, in general, what are the best practices for protecting your backups and disaster recovery replication jobs, assuming that something is hit with a bad actor days or weeks prior to be recognized?
Yeah,
Even
and you
with,
had mentioned that a bit earlier, Paul. I mean, you see the bad backup, and maybe they haven't verified or tested their backup environment and recovery practices, right? But why don't you comment a bit about that?
yeah, sure, happy to. So yeah, we've definitely seen it with generally when an attacker is on the network, once they gain access, they are kind of lurking. They're taking their time, they're learning about the environment. They don't deploy the ransomware straight away. So we've seen cases where the backups were, they were online backups, and the attacker went in and deleted them all, or that they were already infected, going back a number of weeks. So if the attacker's on the network for a few weeks, they infect the backups. It depends how far back those backups go. And then, of course, yeah, I've seen case or heard of cases where hit by ransomware, and then the backups were corrupt because they hadn't been tested fully, and they were unable to restore. And that goes back to that whole thing of having to rebuild the whole environment. So it can have a terrible, really bad impact.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I mean, I have a background in backup technology. Prior business called Datamir was deep in that area. You've got to test. The reality is you have to be on modern operating systems. Your backup should be tested regularly. Your recovery process has to be well established, and your team has to know how to do it. And they
Mm,
have to be able to monitor that backup environment for corruption
yeah,
with malware or other corruptions that can happen in the backup process. It's not a casual activity. You do have
no,
to test, and you do have to practice.
yeah.
Your test dev and recovery practice has to be done, and you can't be
And that can be
casual
a
about it, right?
that can be a challenge with legacy systems, can't it? Because you don't want to run a kind of restore because you may be unsure if it'll actually come back or not. You don't want to risk. Some organizations may not want to risk it. So cross your
Yeah,
fingers.
we have customers don't want to even unplug restart their machines or reboot the machine or unplug the machine. I mean, they can't. They're worried about power outages.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about because of the recoverability issue of these fragile older
Mm,
systems. That's a problem. You
yeah.
can't be running that level of fragility and assume that you can continue in business. You've got to get to scalable modern tools that with the modern backup and recovery processes in place, that you can test either to cloud instances or a hybrid cloud if you're running internally. You do have to have an investment in that area
Yeah.
because when it happens, you don't want compromised backups. You want to have the security tools in place and have a recovery plan that's well prepped and practiced.
I think, yeah, and I was going to say, so we run tabletop exercises with clients. So for instance, they have a ransomware attack, kind of run through that kind of scenario with their crisis management team and the communication process. You know, how do they deal with internal communications, external communications if it leaks to the media? How do they escalate to the board? Those kind of things. But a question the board or senior management always ask is, how long will it take to restore from backup? And the IT team needs to know, you know, we're going to be out for 4 or 5 days while we rebuild all these systems. So doing those tests and running those kind of scenarios puts you in a much better position should the worst happen.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've got one more question. This is definitely for you, Nigel. So does the VirtaMove software address the need to retain the original source server's host name and or IP when moving legacy apps?
That's another really good question. We provide a lot of flexibility. We're able to remap server name, host name. It's all automated. It's part of the AI tool to do that. You can keep it and do role swapping between the modern OS version server and the old one. You can maintain server name, IP address dynamically using the tool. It does all that remapping for you, and that saves a lot of time. And we even provide independent tools that you can use that if you're doing migrations by hand that will do what we call config on the fly and reconfigure those key parameters as you move the workloads.
Awesome. That's great.
So look, I really appreciate your time today, Paul. I mean, very interesting insights in this whole security area and the dynamics that are going on. You know, it's top priority for many of our customers, and you can see why, given the stats you were presenting today.
Yeah, and just one final thought I'd leave with people. It's something we always say. You know, don't let, and we talked about procrastination, but don't let perfection get in the way of progress. So any steps organizations can take to improve their cybersecurity, and whether it's securing legacy systems, you know, that's really key because you'll be in a better place than you were kind of a few months prior to that. So keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's a key point. Keep moving forward.
Exactly.
Look, we appreciate everyone attending this presentation. There's a few appendices that get more into the technical details that we covered today. We'll circulate the presentation. We've recorded the material. We'll send that along if you'd like to socialize it internally. And thank you very much for attending, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.